offensive. Safety, freedom, peace, home, the dear one back at the fireside. All after 52 months of gaunt distortion. After 52 months of making burdens grievous to be borne and binding them on men's backs, at last, all at once, suddenly and everywhere, the burdens were cast down. At least, Churchill brooded. So for the moment it seemed. Nearly 2,000 miles to the east, Joseph Stalin, People's Commissar for Nationalities, also brooded. He scanned the patchy news reports from the West for confirming proof that the war's chaotic end signaled the predicted death of capitalism in the collapsing belligerent countries. Awaiting the moment of world revolution, he meantime fought savagely to protect the revolution in Russia, imperiled in its very infancy by civil war and foreign intervention. Commissar Stalin's special assignment was the defense of the southern front, centered on the Volga River city of Tsaritsyn, later Stalingrad, still later Volgograd, gateway to the Caucasus and its precious supplies of grain. There he dealt with suspected counter-revolutionaries in the summer and fall of 1918 with the calculating terror that was to become his hallmark. On a large black barge anchored in mid-river, he nightly ordered the shooting of dozens of prisoners, whose bodies were then tossed into the current. "Death solves all problems," Stalin said. "No man, no problem." Returning to Moscow in November, he gloated at the execution of Roman Malinovsky, the informer who had betrayed him to the Tsar's Okhrana in 1913, resulting in Stalin's banishment to Siberia. There, alone and embittered for 4 years, he had plotted his way to power and retribution. Franklin Delano Roosevelt spent those same 4 years savoring a measure of power as Assistant Secretary of the Navy in Washington, D.C. On the morning of November 11, 1918, Roosevelt awoke in Washington to a riotous din of honking automobile horns, pealing bells, piping whistles, and shouting people. The feeling of relief and thankfulness, his wife Eleanor remembered, was beyond description. Yet for Franklin Roosevelt, the end of the war also came as something of a disappointment. Impetuous, romantic, ambitious, he had been compelled to serve out the war bound to his desk as a civilian administrator. His magical political name, his familial Rooseveltian vigor, his handsome, youthful presence, his apparent ubiquity, his volleys of crisply phrased memos had all earned him a reputation as one of the most able and charismatic of Washington's wartime personalities. But it was not enough. Like his kinetic cousin Theodore, he longed for the fray, yearned to emulate his legendary Uncle Ted, who had resigned the very position that Franklin now held to take up arms in the Spanish-American War. Neither Franklin Roosevelt nor the world had yet absorbed the dreadful lessons of the Great War, and in his martial yearnings the youthful Assistant Secretary had something in common with both Hitler and Churchill. Hitler, the sulking and penurious Viennese art student, had abandoned his native Austria and fled to Munich to join the German army in 1914. In his military regiment he found the warmth of comradeship that had eluded him in the aching vacuity of his civilian life. The outbreak of war, he wrote, seemed like deliverance from the angry feelings of my youth. Churchill owed both his manhood and his fame to his soldierly exploits in India and in the Boer War. In 1914, while a cabinet minister, he had dashed across the Channel to take personal charge of the defense of Antwerp. Having tasted blood, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith wryly noted, Churchill was beginning like a tiger to raven for more, and begs that he may be put in some kind of military command. He soon got his wish. In January 1916, a middle-aged man accustomed to brandy and silks, Lieutenant Colonel Churchill led an infantry battalion of the 6th Royal Scots Fusiliers up to their rough billets in the front near Ypres, facing the Germans across the same hellish landscape into which Adolf Hitler's 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment was repeatedly sent. Roosevelt knew no such satisfactions. Late on the night of October 31, 1918, he called at the White House to ask President Woodrow Wilson for a naval commission. "Too late," Wilson replied. He had already received the first armistice proposals from the newly forming German government, and the war would be over very soon. Roosevelt had to content himself with an official inspection trip to the front in the summer of 1918. It was this journey that underlay the claim he made nearly 20 years later, "I have known war." On July 31st, a British destroyer put him ashore at Dunkirk, not 40 miles from the spot where Hitler was to be gassed some 10 weeks afterward. Impatient and reckless, Roosevelt plunged about the battlefields and courted such danger as he could find. In Belleau Wood, where American troops had helped to stop the final German advance just weeks earlier, he threaded his way around water-filled shell holes and past countless rude graves, marked only by whittled wooden crosses or bayoneted rifles stuck in the earth. At